What happens when Elvis Presley sees a fan being mocked? He does something no one expects. It was a warm summer night in Las Vegas, 1972. The lights of the city glowed like a million stars, and the air outside the International Hotel buzzed with excitement. Inside the showroom, every seat was taken, and the crowd was restless with anticipation. Elvis Presley was minutes away from stepping on stage, and fans had traveled from across the country just to catch a glimpse of the king in action. Among them sat a young man in the third row, nervously fidgeting with his collar. His name was Danny. He couldn't have been more than 22, with a shy smile and wide eyes that lit up the moment he walked into the room. But it wasn't just his excitement that drew attention. It was what he was wearing. Danny had come fully dressed like Elvis. White jumpsuit, high collar, rhinestones, and even the iconic hairstyle, slicked back and held in place with a little too much pomade. He'd saved up for months just to attend this concert. Bought the outfit with the last of his paycheck. Practiced Elvis songs in the mirror every night. This wasn't just a concert for him, it was the biggest moment of his life. But not everyone saw it that way. People around him started pointing. A few laughed. A couple of young women 2 seats down whispered and giggled behind their hands. One man in a suit chuckled loud enough for Danny to hear and muttered, "Look at this clown. Thinks he's the king." Danny's smile faded for a second, but he tried to hold it together. He kept telling himself he didn't care what they thought. But the truth was, their laughter stung. What was supposed to be a magical night suddenly felt a little smaller, a little lonelier. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a single thought crept in. Maybe I made a mistake dressing like this. The lights dimmed and the orchestra began to play. But Danny couldn't shake the feeling that every eye in the room was on him, and not in the way he'd imagined. More whispers, more glances. Someone behind him even nudged a friend and said, "I bet he thinks Elvis is gonna pull him on stage." Laughter followed. Quick, sharp. Danny's ears burned. He stared straight ahead, trying to focus on the music. But it was hard. Every quiet second between songs felt like a spotlight was on him. He tugged nervously at the rhinestone cuff of his sleeve. He'd come here to celebrate his idol, to show love and admiration. But now it felt like he was being punished for it. The woman next to him leaned over and asked, "Are you one of those Elvis impersonators or something?" Her tone wasn't mean. Exactly. But it wasn't kind either. "No, ma'am," Danny said softly. "Just a big fan." She smiled politely but turned away before he could say more. He swallowed hard, suddenly wishing he'd just worn a regular t-shirt and jeans. And then the curtain rose. The room erupted in cheers as Elvis Presley appeared, larger than life in his own dazzling suit, commanding the stage with his effortless charisma. The band kicked into CC Rider, and everyone jumped to their feet. Everyone except Danny. He stayed seated, frozen in place, feeling like a joke among all these people dressed for a night out. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was dressed like the man on stage, but somehow, he'd never felt further from him. Up on stage, Elvis scanned the crowd, his eyes moving from section to section. And just for a second, just a split second, Danny thought their eyes met. It was so quick, he wasn't sure if he imagined it. But then Elvis tilted his head, paused mid-song, and smiled. It was subtle, small, but something had shifted. And though the audience didn't know it yet, that one look was about to change everything. As the band rolled into the second number, Elvis was doing what he always did, reading the room. He had a gift for it. Years on stage had taught him that the audience always tells you something if you pay attention, and tonight, something caught his eye. Near the third row, slightly off-center, he noticed a young man dressed unmistakably like himself. Not just the jumpsuit, but the hair, the posture, even the quiet reverence in the way he sat while everyone else stood and swayed. But what really drew Elvis in was the boy's face. He wasn't smiling. In fact, he looked embarrassed, like he'd made a mistake. Elvis kept singing, but he started piecing it together. The fan had come dressed to honor him, and by the looks of the body language around him, that tribute had been met with ridicule instead of appreciation. He'd seen it before, people laughing at someone brave enough to show their heart. And Elvis didn't like it, not one bit. He gave a small nod to his band, signaling a shift in tempo, and walked toward the edge of the stage, still playing it cool. The spotlight followed him as he scanned the crowd again. Then, mid-verse, he paused, just long enough to make the audience quiet down. "Well, would you look at that?" he said casually. his southern drawl smooth and warm. "We got us a young man out there tonight, dressed sharper than I am." Laughter rippled through the crowd, gentler this time, more surprised than mocking. The spotlight moved, hesitated, and then settled on Danny. His face turned pale, then red. He looked like he wanted to melt into his seat. Elvis didn't break eye contact. "Cute buddy. Yeah, you in the white suit. You came ready, didn't ya?" Danny nodded slowly, unsure what was happening. Some of the people around him were still laughing, but now with a different tone, like they weren't quite sure where this was going. "You got a voice to match that outfit?" Elvis asked, grinning. Danny blinked. Was this real? Elvis held out a hand and said something no one expected. Come on up here and let's find out." The crowd gasped. Danny froze. His heart thundered in his chest. He could barely move, much less breathe. People around him turned in shock, murmuring in disbelief. Some smiled. Others looked skeptical. A man behind him muttered, "He ain't serious." But Elvis was still holding out his hand. Danny slowly stood up, every movement feeling like it was happening underwater. His knees trembled as he made his way toward the stage, helped over the barrier by a security guard who had suddenly appeared. The room was silent now. No laughter, no music. Just the soft squeak of Danny's shoes on the floor as he climbed the steps and stood beside the king himself. Elvis leaned in with a wink. "You all right, son?" Danny nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, sir." "Sir, you know any of my songs?" Danny hesitated. "I've been practicing Can't Help Falling in Love." Elvis smiled, motioned to the band, and just like that, the lights dimmed, the music shifted, and the opening notes of one of his most beloved ballads floated into the room. "Then let's sing it together," Elvis said. The crowd leaned in, unsure of what was about to happen. Danny took the microphone Elvis offered him, and for a heartbeat, everything paused. The lights, the noise, the nerves. Then he started singing. It wasn't perfect. His voice wavered a little at first, unsure. But it was honest. It came from the gut, from every night he'd practiced alone in his bedroom mirror. And halfway through the first verse, Elvis joined in, harmonizing beside him, his voice lifting Danny's with warmth and encouragement. The room erupted in applause. You could see it in Danny's face, the disbelief, the pride, the transformation. This was no longer the boy people had laughed at. This was someone brave, standing toe-to-toe with a legend, not just singing but being seen. As the final note faded, Elvis threw an arm around Danny's shoulders and bowed slightly to the audience. "Now that's what I call heart," he said. The place exploded. People were cheering, clapping, even standing. And those who had laughed earlier, they were now cheering the loudest. As the final chord of a Can't Help Falling in Love faded into the velvet air, there was a pause, just long enough to let the magic sink in. Elvis stepped back slightly and looked at Danny, his hand still resting on the young man's shoulder. Danny's eyes were shining, his hands trembling just a little, overwhelmed by what had just happened. Elvis raised the mic again, but instead of jumping into the next song, he did something unexpected. He turned back to the crowd. "You see that?" He said, his voice calm, but carrying a weight that instantly commanded attention. "This young man came here tonight because he loves the music. Came dressed like me, sang like me. But more than anything, he showed guts." The audience went quiet. You could feel the room shifting, the mood sobering from amusement to respect. People began to realize they hadn't just watched a duet. They'd witnessed something much more powerful. "I saw some of y'all laughing earlier," Elvis said, not in anger, but in truth. "Well, I know what it looks like when someone's getting laughed at for putting themselves out there. I've seen it 1,000 times. I've lived it." He paused, letting that land. "I started out just like him, grew up in second-hand clothes, got laughed at for how I looked, how I talked, what I dreamed. But I kept singing, and if I'd listened to the folks who thought I wasn't good enough, well, I wouldn't be standing here right now." Danny stood quietly beside him, his expression now more confident, his chin slightly lifted. The crowd watched, many with softened eyes, a few with guilty glances. Elvis leaned into the mic once more. If you ever see someone chasing something they love, even if they look silly doing it, don't mock them, cheer them on. Because courage doesn't always look perfect. Sometimes it looks like a kid in a white jumpsuit singing his heart out. The room erupted again, this time not just with applause, but with understanding. As the applause faded, Elvis gave Danny one last pat on the back and helped him down from the stage. Security cleared a small path as the crowd reached out to shake his hand, slap his shoulder, tell him, "Well done." The same people who had giggled earlier now looked at him with admiration. Back on stage, Elvis took a moment to sip from a glass of water. Then he looked out at the crowd again, quieter this time. "You know," he began, "being up here on this stage, it's easy to feel like you're the center of everything, but I never forget where I came from. Tupelo, Mississippi, dirt floors, hand-me-down shoes. I remember being that kid in the back of the room, hoping someone would see me." Court. The crowd leaned in, mesmerized. He wasn't just talking now, he was letting them in. My mama used to tell me, "Elvis, how you treat people when no one's watching." I believe that. I believe we don't need money, fame, or the right clothes to matter. What matters is heart. He scanned the audience again, locking eyes with as many people as he could. That boy tonight reminded me why I started doing this in the first place. Not for the lights, not for the money, but because music has a way of bringing people together, of reminding us we're all the same deep down. A hush fell over the room. Look, maybe tonight you laughed. Maybe you didn't mean to. But if this moment helped you see something different, if it made you stop and think, then it was worth it. He smiled softly. We all need grace, and sometimes we need someone to remind us what it looks like. With that, Elvis nodded to the band. The drummer clicked his sticks together, and the music kicked up again, smooth and joyful. The energy returned, but the heart of the night had already happened. A lesson had been delivered, not with anger or shame, but with humility, music, and a little bit of soul. And as the show continued, no one in that audience would ever see an Elvis impersonator the same way again. Danny didn't sleep that night, not a wink. He lay in his small hotel bed, still in his Elvis outfit, staring at the ceiling, replaying every second of what had just happened, the spotlight, the silence. The moment he opened his mouth and sang with Elvis Presley, it didn't feel real, but it was. The next morning, the hotel lobby was buzzing. Word of the duet had already spread. People he'd never met came up to him, shook his hand, asked for pictures. A hotel staff member handed him a handwritten note. It was from Elvis. All it said was, "Keep singing. The world needs more people like you." Danny folded that note like it was gold and kept it in his wallet for the rest of his life. What had started as a night of laughter at him had turned into something bigger than he could have ever imagined. Elvis didn't just share a song. He shared a message. He shared a message. He turned the tables on judgment, and in doing so, lifted a young fan up in front of thousands. In the years that followed, Danny went on to perform professionally, not as an Elvis impersonator, but as a singer in his own right. But he never forgot that moment, or the lesson it taught him. Be bold, even when it feels scary. Be kind, even when no one's watching. And never, ever let someone else's judgment dim your light. Elvis could have ignored him. He could have let the mocking continue and focused on the show. But instead, he used the moment to teach everyone in that room, and now, all of us, a powerful truth. Sometimes the most legendary thing you can do is lift someone else up. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the importance of kindness, courage, and standing up for others, then do us a favor. Give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel for more untold stories like this. And if you've ever been laughed at, overlooked, or underestimated, drop a comment below. Tell us your story, because just like Danny, someone out there might need to hear it. Thank you for watching. And as Elvis would say, "You're taking care of business in a flash."